Hello and welcome to the Art of Being Human. On the last segment we talked about what happens when you start to confront a person about suicide, doing it gently of course, and what to do if they say that they are thinking about killing themselves. Do they have the means available? Do they have a plan in place? What happens? Are they going to be able to follow their plan? If they're not going to be able to follow their plan, that may postpone things and give you more time to intervene. And we went over those kinds of things. Now, I want to this segment help you to evaluate. If you ask a person if they're going to kill themselves and they say no, how do you know they're telling the truth, especially if you feel very strongly that they are going to do it? Well, there's a way. So let's get over here. First of all, I want to mention in suicides, you always have to give them hope. You always have to give them a reason to live. Even as you're confronting them, you can't say, I know things are pretty bad and I don't blame you. You have to stop to think, what will bring them back to life? Get them out of their cocoon, because suicide can be a manipulative decision where they manipulate you in terms of making you do certain things because they tell you that if you don't, they'll kill themselves. That's a manipulative way of committing suicide, and that's not legitimate, and you can't let them do that. It can also be the ultimate act of self-hatred, where they really hate themselves and they're going to kill themselves because they hate themselves so much. You have to give them hope. You can't demean them. You can't say things like, chin up, things will be better, because actually what you're doing is you're demeaning them. You're telling them that their emotions aren't valid. You have to validate a person's emotions. Help them to validate their own emotions. And say things like, I understand why you would feel this way, even though I don't think that that's the correct course of action. I think that there are better things that you can do than kill yourself. You know, you bring up their children. You have a responsibility. You have people that love you. You may not feel it, but it doesn't mean that it's not true. You can't always trust your own emotions. If you feel that you're no good and you feel that nobody loves you and you feel that there's no hope, those emotions may not be accurate. But I understand they feel accurate to you, and I want to validate the fact that this is the way that you feel. However, they may not be accurate in terms of what the truth of your life situation is. You may not feel that you are loved, and yet there are all kinds of people that do love you. You know, your family does, your friends do, your children do, even though you don't feel it. You see, you can't always trust your emotions. You validate them as being the way that you really feel, but that doesn't mean that they're always accurate. You know, if I feel that the world is so bad, the world is coming to an end tomorrow, it may be the way that I feel. I may have reasons why I think that's true, and I have to validate the way that that's the reason I feel this way. And yet, tomorrow comes and the world doesn't come to an end. And there we are, we're still here. So I want to go into, having said that, I want to go into what if a person says no. You have to evaluate very, very carefully what their answer is. If they say no, I'm not going to kill myself, then what is the mood and the emotions that they show when they make that statement to you? If you say, are you going to hurt yourself? Is there any chance that we're going to be grieving because you're going to do something to yourself? And they say no, the tone of voice is going to give them away. If they say, no, I wouldn't do that, just as a matter of fact, then they're probably telling the truth. They're telling the truth when they say, well, no, I wouldn't think about doing that. That's not anything I would think about. And it's just a very matter of fact, like you're saying, would you like a glass of water? And they say no. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're emotionally connected with it even. Then that's probably true that they are not going to do it. They're probably not going to. But if they say no, but they're agitated about it, what do you mean asking me a question like that? Of course I'm not going to do that. What would ever give you a stupid idea like that? Don't you know me better than that? And on they go. They get angry, they get agitated. Then there's a lot more chance that they're actually going to do it. They're angry because they let it slip and you caught on to them. They're angry because they don't want you to know, but you suspect that they are suicidal, and they're angry about that. They're angry about a lot of things, and the anger may come out against you. Don't take it personally. That's the way they are, and that's how they're expressing their emotions in the present. And if they say, well, no, I'm not going to do it, and you're stupid for thinking that, then they're probably saying yes. And you just need to be aware of that the tone of the voice and how they answer the questions, whether they're matter of fact or whether they're really emotional, will give you a clue and will give you a key as to whether they are telling the truth or not. And then you could say, if they are if they're hostile, you could also ask them, well, I know I asked the question and you seem rather upset. Why are you so upset? Because I asked the question. What are you thinking right now? And then they may become more upset. You don't want to get into an argument with them. It's better to make statements. I'm concerned about you, and now you're angry. Is there anything you need to tell me that you're not telling me? Of course, what you're really saying is, I still suspect that you're suicidal. And in that situation, I would suspect that a person was suicidal. Do you want me to contact anybody? Do you want any help in dealing with your emotions right now? Do you need to see a professional? Well, of course, they do need to see a professional. But they will get very, very agitated, very, very angry if you've caught on to them and they don't want you to know. Now, if they're not planning on committing a suicide, they just simply say no. No, I'm not going to do it. You know, did you rob a bank? No, of course I didn't. And you wouldn't suspect that they had. But if you said, did you rob a bank, and they had, they'd be agitated about it. Somebody saw me, you know, somebody knows what I've done. And then they get defensive and they get agitated. But a person who is not in a situation where they're going to commit suicide or a crime, they have nothing to be agitated about. They don't have to be defensive because it's not on their radar screen. Are you thinking of hurting somebody? No, I wouldn't do that. If you're angry at a person, it doesn't mean you're going to hurt them. And so if that's not, it's anything that's in your mind, then you can say no and not be defensive because there's nothing to be defensive about. But if anyone accuses you of something and you've done it and there is something to be defensive about, that's when a person's going to show symptoms of anger, agitation, and it's going to come out against the person who asked them or made the statement to begin with. And you're going to say, the temptation is to say, well, I'm sorry I asked you, I didn't mean to upset you. You might say that, but in the back of your mind you'd be thinking there's more to this. There's more to this, what they're admitting to. So watch the emotional changes because that's important. You can believe them sometimes, but sometimes you can't believe them. The other thing you need to do, you have to watch energy level changes. Now, this is something that happens in suicide. A person is nervous, a person is upset, a person is depressed and they're in a certain amount of anxiety, a certain amount of angst because they're in the process of making a decision. The decision is, will I or won't I commit suicide? And they're struggling with that decision, and they're bound to be emotional and upset as they are working with that decision. Then they come to the point where they make a decision, yes or no. It doesn't matter whether it is yes or no. When they've made that decision, all of their anxiety stops at that point, and they start to feel good about themselves. They start to feel good because all of the trauma of making the decision is over with because they have made the decision. So if a person says, no, I'm not going to do it, but you feel that they are going to do it, they will start to feel really good. And the key is they're going to go from depressed to elation within maybe a half an hour. Within 30 minutes, they go from deeply depressed because they're going to do it to suddenly being elated and feeling really good. whether they're going to do it or whether they're not going to do it. And the reason they feel so much better is that the decision has now been made and they are no longer struggling with the decision. That's important to remember. But it doesn't mean they're not going to do it. You know, mental hospitals would work with patients that were depressed and suicidal, and they would be put in a mental hospital for care. Then suddenly, they would feel a lot better. And the staff of the hospital would think, well, they're over it. They're not suicidal. See how much better they are. See how much better mood they're in. See how much more easily they talk. And on the basis of that, they would release them from the hospital. And within the next few days, the individual was dead because they'd committed suicide. And the question was, why would they commit suicide when they felt so much better? We thought they were over it. We thought they were getting better. So we released them on the basis that they were better, and now they've killed themselves. Well, you have to ask the question, why did they feel better? They felt better because they'd made the decision and they no longer had to struggle with the decision. Now, if they had struggled with a decision and then decided no, they wouldn't do it, they would feel just as good, but they wouldn't commit. But there were a high percentage of people who committed once they felt really good because they had made the decision to do it. The decision was firm in their mind. The hospital released them, and then they died from suicide. I worked with an individual who I intervened in about 3 times to save his life because he was suicidal. And when I got a call from him, and I was a college professor at the time, and he said that he was going to kill himself, and I had to get the police involved because it was just incumbent upon me to do that because there's no way I could reach him. By the time, you know, I told the police he's very depressed and he tells me he's suicidal. They went to find him. By the time they found him, he felt really good. And he said, well, I don't understand why you should be so upset. I'm fine. In the meantime, he had gone out to a store and bought rat poison, and he was going to give himself rat poison. And he felt so good because he made his mind to do it. So he gets back to his apartment and the police are knocking on his door asking him, you know, are you really as depressed as what she thinks you are? He says, oh no, I'm fine. They never checked to see what was in the bag he had after he went to the store. They never checked to see that he had rat poison in his bag. He had just come back from shopping and he'd bought rat poison. He said, oh, I'm fine. She's a little upset, you know, a little bit of a nutcase or whatever he said about me. But at any rate, they called me back and said, he's good. He doesn't feel bad at all. And I knew at that point that he'd made the decision to do it. So I explained to the police, you've got to go back there because he's showing the emotional changes that occur when a person has finally made the decision to do it. And they thought I was just being off the wall. You know, he was fine. He said he was fine. They weren't going to waste their time and go back. They had other things to do, so they never went back. And in the time they decided not to, he didn't take the rat poison, but he took every other pill in the house that he could find. And then he decided he wanted to live. And I think God intervened because he did live. He stopped taking what he was taking, and he forced himself to throw up and forced himself to get his things out of his system and walked around, and he survived. But for a number of 2 or 3 days, I didn't know whether he was alive or dead. I couldn't convince the police department to go back and check on him again. But he did survive it and made a promise to me that he would never do it again. And the reason that he decided that he wanted to live was it suddenly dawned to him, I will never know what I could have become. Because he had some gifts and abilities, and we were working with him on his gifts and his abilities, and we knew that he could really do well. And so therefore I wanted them to go back and check on him, and they didn't. But he decided he wanted to live himself. And I think just due to the graciousness of God that he did survive it. But he promised me he would never do it again. About that time, You know, I was thinking, I don't know how much more I can help a person like that. I've stepped in, I've done everything I know how to do. You cannot be responsible for a person's life. You cannot be responsible for a person's death. If they do something that's bad, you can help out as much as you can, but it's not your fault if they take their lives, and you've done everything that you can. The one thing that you must do, however, if a person is in a predicament and you think they're really suicidal, they have to get professional help. They need medication, they need psychiatric care, and they have to have professional help. And it's not unusual for me to work with psychiatrists. I would do the counseling, the psychiatrist would give the medication, we'd get together, we'd talk about the individual involved and work with them. And as we work with them, we have case consultation and so forth, and we get a lot of good results that way. This isn't anything you want to try on your own, but the reason I want to bring it up to you is that you will meet people who will be suicidal, and you may be their first line of defense to stop them from doing that. And then when you can stop them and get them to a professional, the professional can take it from there. But a person who is so down and out that they want to kill themselves, they need to have professional help, but they need to have a good support system. If they have a good support system, they have parents, they have friends, they have children, they have a medical staff, whatever they need to help them through it. I don't think it's necessary for anyone to kill themselves, and it's, I think, a very, very bad decision. I don't think it's a decision that should ever be in our hands. And I have letter upon letter upon letter from people who have almost done it and then got better, and we're forever glad that they didn't do it because of the kinds of life and the happiness that they could have had. And had they done it, they would have missed out. So it is important to be that support system and be able to recognize when a person may be in trouble. It can be manipulative, it can be anger against the self, it can be manipulation of other people, it can be a rational act, it can be mental illness. You can't always pinpoint what it is. And then again, there are some people who never tell you, and you just never know. And when they do it, and you're left wondering why. Because they never talked to you about it. They never gave you clues and cues. So when you're working with something like this, there's no such thing as never is never. You know, you can't say never is never, but because you never know what's going to happen. So if a person has decided to kill themselves, they can go from deeply depressed to very, very happy, joyous, because the decision has been made, and that change of emotions is not so much due to the decision, but is due to the fact that the agony of the decision is over with, and now the decision has been made. Then they're going to proceed with whatever the decision is, and if it's a decision to suicide, it still might not happen right away, because they want to plan it. You know, here's where it becomes a rational act and is not necessarily mental illness. Mental illness, I think suicide would be more impulsive, and you do get impulsive suicides. It's a very tricky thing that you're dealing with, but my purpose in bringing it up is the fact that it is getting to be almost an epidemic in our society, and people need to realize that they can step in and help out, and they can get people to the right help. But you have to be aware. You have to know what to do. If it's a loved one, I know somebody who told their 4-year-old son that they were going to go out and shoot themselves. And they told it to a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old was their own son. And I had to do an immediate intervention because I felt that it could happen in an immediate, there wasn't much time to wait. This is what drains counselors. This is why some people won't deal with suicides, because you can be legally liable even if you've done everything that you can do. Well, I'm going to close it here. I do have maybe one more segment that I want to talk about, in terms of why people communicated and just kind of wrap things up. So I have 1 or 2 more segments to do, and then I think we'll be finished. Well, maybe more than that, because I think I want to give you some examples of suicide notes. If a person leaves a suicide note, how can you tell whether it's a real note or whether it's a fake note? I can't believe that people would write fake notes, but they do. So there are some extraneous things, but this is the core of what we're doing. I've finished the core of what we're doing, and then there are some other little things I need to talk about just to finish it off, which may take a couple of segments, I'm not sure, but about that. And then we're going to go into something else. I want to go into violence. The violence that we're seeing in society is just terrible, and I want to get into what happens and what people suffer from that would cause them to be that way, and how to protect yourself from it. So we will continue all of this next time. Please join me then.